Well, let's talk about Vomit. This will be your fourth album, and it'll be coming out at the end of October through Distorted Recordings. You mentioned that you started working on this album early into the pandemic, and soon after Diseased was released. How much of the style or the approach to this album was influenced by, or maybe a reaction to what you guys did on Diseased?
I don't know. I mean, we didn't really like sit down and plan anything out, right? So it wasn't like, all right, Disease sounded like this. I mean, to me, Disease is more of like a death metal record for us. We had a lot of kind of death metal-y songs on it, or big death metal riffs, on some of the songs. So it wasn't like we're like, oh, all right, well, this one sounded like this, and let's make this one sound like that. We don't really do that. I mean, it's just kind of like tunes kind of come when they come. Sometimes we go fast and furious. We'll be having a song every couple of weeks to work on, like creatively the juices are flowing and we're just going for it. And sometimes, you go 9 months or a year without anything really coming. You know what I mean? So it's not like there's a plan, and it's hard to say that we react to anything. If I knew what we reacted to write good music, then I would cue in on it and do it every day. You know what I mean? It's just kind of a random thing that happens. So, like I said, like we're working on brand new stuff now, and it's coming out like it's at least the first four songs are like up tempo. Like it's almost like a hardcore. So I mean, it's just the way that it's coming out. I don't know if we'll use any of these songs or not, but it's very random the way it all goes together.
Is that something that happens a lot? Do you guys write songs that you end up not recording?
Sometimes, I mean, usually we'll get a pretty good idea right away if it's going to be worth following. If a couple riffs are worth following up on and working on or not. So usually it's only a couple times do we have a complete song that we didn't use it. Usually it's just whatever the genesis of a song would be, right? Like usually there's like one or two riffs that go together really well, and then we'll just kind of like make a song out of it and expand on that. We kind of tell right away, if someone was a little bit too stoned when they came up with that idea, and move on to something a little bit more practical.
And you guys write in the rehearsal room together, right?
Sometimes we do. A lot of times I'll be at home messing around with guitar or bass or whatever, and I'll come up with a couple ideas, and then I'll bring it to practice and show the other guys. Sometimes Chris has some ideas, he brings it to practice, and then sometimes we'll just spontaneously, like, again, we rehearse twice a week for 2-3 hours a night. So I mean, for a band that doesn't tour or play a lot of shows, like, we play together a lot, and we've been playing together. I've been playing with Joe, the drummer, since, 94 off and on, and with Carcass Chris on guitar since like end of 99, early 2000. So, we know how we work. And sometimes we'll just kind of lapse into it like a stoned out jam, and a couple gems will come out of it, and we'll make a song out of it. So there's no set formula, which is kind of cool. We'll work on stuff we've worked on a song for, we'll be working on multiple songs at a time, but it could take a year to get a song right, and we'll just keep fucking with it. It's a good time, actually.
You characterize Disease as being more of a death metal album. What would you say Vomit is?
I don't really know yet. You know what I mean? I mean, it's the Bones album. I don't really know how to describe it right now.
I mean, do you feel like there's maybe more of a 70s vibe to it, or maybe like more of a Motorhead kind of rock and roll vibe to it?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's definitely, there's some kind of themes that always kind of go through all the Bone stuff, right? So there's always a little bit of Motorhead in there, because Motorhead is inescapable. You know what I mean? Like, you can be influenced by a riff by a band that was influenced by Motorhead, right? I mean, there's so many, it's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like the 2 degrees of Motorhead. So at least for us it is. So yeah, there's always a little bit of that. And yeah, I mean, we've been kind of, maybe with the pandemic, not having any shows to go to or anything, sometimes you go to a show and you kind of like catch a band that you that you think is great and maybe surprises you, or maybe it's an old favorite, and they'll play something and it just kind of puts a little worm in your head. You know what I mean? They try to like, oh wow, I like that energy, and maybe without that, we were just kind of stuck listening to our ZZ Top albums and Motorhead shit. Yeah, I mean, I could see how it might sound like that. I mean, again, I've been too busy kind of playing it and recording it and everything else to really like think about it, if that makes any sense.
Is there a playing style that's natural to you, that you feel comes from one area of music or another?
No. And like when I'm at home, like just at home playing, like just fucking around, like up here in my office or whatever, it's like, I'll play along with, Ace of Spades one night, and then, I'll write, some stuff, or I'll rehearse stuff I'm in a few different bands. I'll rehearse stuff that like for upcoming shows, and then I'll play along with like Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, like the LAMF album, and just, I'll play bass to that. I'll play guitar to that. You know what I mean? I'll just kind of just mess around. So like the other day I heard a Dictator song, Backseat Boogie. That was like, oh, this riff is fucking phenomenal. I just went home and grabbed a guitar and just figured it out. You know what I mean? So I'm listening to all kinds of stuff. So like the tunes I bring to the table are probably a little bit, yeah, I guess they are like, 70s influenced and just all to me, what the good music is. And it's hard too, like with like just straight up metal. There's no like rhythm section, right? I mean, it's always like killer drums, but like there's no bass. There's no like interaction, and that might be kind of what separates us a little bit, as we try to do like bands in the 70s and even the 60s did, where, the bass and the drums are doing something together. And it like sets a kind of a foundation for the guitar to do something or the vocal to do something. So I think it's maybe that kind of mentality that we're trying to tap into more, but really not necessarily consciously, but instead of just like everybody playing the same riff kind of a thing.
Yeah. Is that important to you, that bass does something different from what the guitar is doing?
Well, I mean, there's times that there's definitely times where there should be unison line, where meaning the bass and drums play the same riff at the same time. I mean, if you use that, you can use that to great effect if you don't do it all the time, right? But yeah, I don't really, I mean, the songs I write them on guitar, and then I'll play them with Joe, the drummer, and then Joe will come with a drum beat, and then Joe's drum beat will inform how I write the bass line, and if Joe's doing like a weird triplet feel, I'll try to like accent a part of it, or, you know what I mean? I'll try to fill up where he's not filling in, and vice versa, you know what I mean? So I try to make the bass kind of play off what the drums are doing, but the riff usually starts as a guitar riff.
You mentioned that your taste and your style skews more to the 70s, that era of heavy music. What about Carcass Chris? Where do you think his influences come from?
Chris is, he's a big Van Halen fan. One of the biggest Quiet Riot fans you'll ever meet. Carcass Chris is fucking Carlos Cavazo all day long. But no, and Carcass also, he's into some hardcore and stuff like that too. But I mean, a lot of Iron Maiden, a lot of the 80s kind of classic type of stuff. Sabbath, we're always fucking around with Sabbath riffs like at the practice spot. But I don't think Chris is like punk and rock and roll as I am, but more of like the quality guitar players in heavy metal, like in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s too. And Chris is a fan of a good guitar tone too, not just like a riff. You know what I mean? He'll be like, oh wow, that's great, and it sounds like this, and he'll get way into that too, which is pretty cool. It's like a 3-dimensional rock fan,
And maybe we'll get back to Van Halen in a little bit.
Sure.
As far as the guitar tone, were you guys looking for anything specific to do with this album?
Really, so the guitar tone has been kind of like a thing for us, right? So the first album, we recorded it basically live, and it was just with one guitar, no overdubs or anything like that. And we felt it was kind of dry. And so the next one we tried, doing like, so like on the first one, we did an old school style. We panned the bass to the left side, the guitar to the right side. There was no overdubs of guitars. There weren't like, a lot of times a band will do 2 or 3 layers of guitars and it thickens it up and it sounds real sweet. But we wanted to go for this live feel. When Chris takes a solo, there's no rhythm guitar in the background. It's just the bass on the first album. So as we kind of moved on and we've written different songs, especially starting with Diseased, these songs needed like more heaviness out of the guitar than just like the live kind of one guitar sound could do. So we started kind of overdub, not overdub, but like add layers of guitars over each other. And we did a little bit more on this one. And I think we only did, 2 rhythms and a solo, which really isn't a lot compared to what most metal bands do. But for us, it was like thrown in the kitchen sink. But yeah, so we'd always want to make the guitars heavier. And, on this one too, we try to bring up a little more in the mix because he's got a great tone. I mean, you just got to showcase it.
You guys usually record live, right?
We do. This one was, so we always record drums, guitar, and bass at the same time, all like live in the room, or, whatever, amps and isolation booths or whatever. But like Joe sits up in we've used the same studio every time. This place called Electrical Audio in Chicago. It's actually owned by Steve Albini, who's like a famous producer type of guy. He did like a Nirvana record or whatever. We don't use him. He's too expensive. He's like $1,200 an hour or something like that.
I mean, he's getting points from those Nirvana albums, right? So he probably doesn't need the money.
It's a rough world out there in the studio world right now. Everybody's got a fucking laptop and a program at home, and no one needs to go to the studio really anymore. So it's kind of like studio is going to be like the next version of the compact disc. You know, we can do a whole different interview on that. But I mean, you don't really need to go to the studio anymore. You know, unfortunately. But we're old and we're stubborn, so we still go. You know, we're too technically inept to figure it out on our own. But no, so we always record live. You know, me and Joe are in the same room. Chris is in the ISO booth, and we just run through the song. And then, you know, usually we only do like 2 or 3 times until we get the drums right, because Joe's got this massive drum kit. So once the drums are good, then we move on to the next one. If we have to, we'll go back, and if I got to fix the bass part, we'll fix it. If we got to fix the guitar part, we'll fix it. And then from there on, you know, Chris will put on a second guitar track and then a solo. And then that's it. So, I mean, it's kind of like a hybrid. It's like 50-50. You know, the foundation is all live, and then we'll kind of dress it up from there.
For you personally, what's the benefit to having all you guys in the room together?
I mean, you just have that energy. We're all making the eye contact. You know what I mean? I mean, like I said, we rehearse constantly. And so there's like just, it's kind of hard to describe to like, if you don't play in a band or play an instrument, but like, you'll be going into a lead part and you kind of look over the guitar player and see what he's doing. And then it's like, you kind of check in with the drummer and see where we're at. And there's like this kind of like communication going on between the three of us just by looking at each other, just kind of like by our body language while we're playing. And to me, that's where like the magic is of being in a band. You know, I mean, it's in this day and age, it's almost, you know, like the new thing, or not the new thing. It's been going on for a long time. Like the one man band thing, you know, one guy just programs the drums. It just goes back, tracks the guitar, tracks the bass, tracks the vocals. This is like an energy thing where, I mean, and, you know, every song we play, we're playing it like as hard as we could play it too. It's like, you know, the whole point is to play it as hard. So like, it's like the train is almost going to fall off the tracks, but not quite, you know what I mean? And like, that's like the edge we try to push it to. And you can't do that if you just like play to a click track, you know what I mean? We've got to be in the same room and just kind of dedicate, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And the three of you guys have been working together for so long that you probably have like a sixth sense of what the rest of the band is going to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, there's very little. We've been together for so long that we don't always even want to talk to each other, right? But we don't even need to half the time. You know, once we get going, you know, we call it like getting in the orb, like getting in the zone. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of slip into this weird slipstream, and like we're just off to the races. We don't even really talk about much of anything.